Everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Rhetoric. Today I want to talk about, kind of think out loud with you about change, um, individual, organizational, societal change, and how some of my assumptions around change drive a lot of the ways that I talk about stuff on this channel. As a point of entry, I'd like to refer to, a lot of the comments that are made in some of my previous videos, which in some ways seem like they are disagreeing with me, and they are. And at the same time, I don't disagree with them. So a typical comment was made several days ago. Somebody was watching one of my videos on migration, and they said, I just think it's unfair to ignore the challenge of, how many migrants a society can take in without wrecking the system. And I would say absolutely. I if I in talking about the need to approach all social problems from the lens of human dignity and from a concern for people, um, I try not to be ignorant of the fact that, yeah, of course, we live in complex systems, and decisions you make in one area affect things in another area. Um, yeah, I don't disagree with those kind of comments. Um, but it does cause me to think about, like, what are my assumptions? What am I bringing to the table that causes me to kind of speak the way I do? So, um, I don't know if my viewers know this or not, but all of my professional work has been around transformation. When I was younger, I worked in corporate America. Uh, all of my work involved organizational change, and then for the last 15 years in my academic life, my all my work is around individual learning and change, and how that interacts with group change, organizational change, societal change, stuff like that. This is kind of what I think about on a daily basis, which isn't meant to imply that therefore I have the answers. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying this is what I think about. And there's one thing that just kind of that really influences my thinking, and that is that there is a reciprocal relationship between the way that a person thinks and the way that groups of people think and their behaviors. Now, when I say reciprocal, I mean that very intentionally. I think it's commonly accepted that if a person were to change his or her way of thinking, if a group of people changed the way they thought, that of course would lead to changes in how they acted in the world. Now I would say, yeah, of course, we are not such deterministic beings that everything affects us and we have no control. We can't change anything. Of course we can change. But I think one thing that doesn't get talked about as much is the flip side of that. And that is that the ways we act shape how we think. And I think I could probably take that down a few different roads, but let me give one example that for me is really important. So, when I was 2 years old, 4 years old, 6, 8, 10 years old, I was, immersed into a world that was it was a idiosyncratic world for me. I was enmeshed in a certain time and place with a certain broad society with structures and institutions and norms and yada yada. And then within that, within a very particular family and community. And if we are anything, we humans are adaptable. And so I was absorbing those cultural norms like a sponge. I was engaged in day to day activities, rituals, just everything. And from that, in any, there's always like an implied logic and assumptions about the world and assumptions about me as a person that are embedded in all those things. And I learned I learned how to see the world from this immersion in a very particular social context. And I would have suffered greatly from cognitive dissonance if I was living and acting a certain way and my understanding of the world and how things work and how things should be was very much different. That would cause like this agitation. And when we can't change the world, we change ourselves. We change our way of thinking. And so, especially as a kid growing up, being molded by my environment, I developed certain ways of thinking, and I developed just a whole host of assumptions about the world, the way it works, other people, human nature, who I am, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that holds out. I think if you look at why are there different company cultures and companies, uh, I mean, there's just an amazing diversity of cultures that you'll find in different organizations. And I think a big part of that is, from the inception of the company and based on who they hired and how they made decisions and what practices evolved and organizational structures, et cetera, a certain culture kind of developed. And so when people are hired into the company, they are put through certain processes. They're taught how to do their, this is the mechanism by which you do your job. And all those things kind of shapes the way that you think in that environment. It shapes the way that we interact together in that environment. So let's say, just as a thought exercise, that you were selected to be on a team to um, determine and enact a new vision for the company, right? The board of directors commissioned this team, and they said, we've been successful so far as a company, but times they are a changing, and if we don't change with the times, then we're not going to be successful. So we want you to think outside the box, question everything, come up with a vision for what we need to do and what we need to be in order to be a world leader in the future. And I imagine when that team got together, a very ineffective approach would be for everybody, whenever somebody threw out an idea, everybody else to say, no, we know the truth about everything. Everything we are, this is what's possible. The way that things have been here in the company, this is who we are. This is our core competence. How could you dare say that we should expand the scope of our company or go in a new direction when what we have done is this and we know this works and we know that hasn't worked because in the past we tried it, whatever. It would just be very ineffective. I think a team like that, if you were on it, most people would probably say, let's suspend judgment about what's possible just for the moment. And let's just envision what it is we want to become as a company. And then, yeah, at some point, let's look at realistic things of what's the difference between our vision and how things are now. What are the ways of thinking that would have to shift? What are the assumptions? What are the ways of doing business? I mean, all these kind of things. But let's start with a vision and let's explore it and let's brainstorm and go at it from the perspective of anything's possible. And then let's try to figure out how it could be made possible. And my experience has been most people, if they're thinking in those terms, don't really have a problem with that approach. They would say, yeah, I mean, something like that is probably how we would approach it. So, something like that. But then when we look at broad societal things, and when I say broad societal, heck, local societal things, we don't really approach it that way. What usually we have is people already have a vision for what they think, the way they think things are. My view of the world, my worldview understandings about human nature, about what's good and right, and therefore how we set up society and how we handle certain things. And then in political situations or local town hall meetings or whatever, oftentimes there's um, no solidarity formed among people where they say, what's the vision we want for ourselves? Let's question everything. Let's think outside the box. Then let's come back to how can we accomplish that. And so I'm reminded of a book called Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey, or possibly Urey and Fisher, I don't remember. And the whole notion of this book is about conflict resolution. And they're looking at their research revolves situations where people have intractable problems. We have two groups of people and there's conflict and there's no way it's difficult to see how they could possibly resolve that conflict. And their main point, I believe, is that in most situations, there can be resolution found to the conflict. But what it requires is that everybody give up on their notion of here is what needs to be done, and instead dig to the root and say, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? When I say we need to do this, it's like, yeah, but why do we? what is it that you're hoping to accomplish by that? What are your real needs that you're searching for? And often, if you get down, even in competitive situations, even in whatever, if you get down to the base level, if you say, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, even if they're not the same, they'll align perfectly. Like, yes, we're both trying to accomplish the same thing. Even if not, they're still compatible. We could still probably find a way to help everybody get what they're trying to accomplish. But you have to start there. And you have to be willing to say, whatever I think the path is to get to it, I'm willing to question that. So let's work together on solving this so that we both get what we want. And I find that kind of a useful metaphor, a useful way of thinking about lots and lots of things. So when I'm talking about issues in this channel, whether it's migration or whatever, yeah, I think a lot of times I'm coming at it from a place of, here's my vision for how things could be. Not that there wouldn't be some intervening steps in terms of shifts in how we do things and shifts in how we think that wouldn't be necessary first. I have no problem with that. I think I'm just, and I'm not saying I'm right. I think I'm bothered when people immediately say the way things are is the way they should be. And because my thinking is that was almost never the case. The way things are is the way things are. The way things should be is something I think should spend more time envisioning and more time talking together about and talking across differences. So just because I pointed to migration earlier, in the case of migration, if somebody's saying we should we should let all migrants in, and somebody else says no, we should enforce our laws. We have immigration laws. We should just enforce them. That, getting to the Fisher in your example, are kind of like way up the ladder here in terms of what should we do, kind of. And I would just say, what is it we're trying to accomplish here? And I think if somebody said, well, Chad, what I'm trying to accomplish is having a country of law, that we have laws, and if you don't enforce the laws, then you have anarchy. And I would say, you know what? I actually agree with that. Absolutely, I agree with that. And then if somebody else said, we need to have a greater concern for human suffering. If people are coming here, why are they coming here? Is there a legitimate reason? And is there no real reason that we couldn't let them in and do whatever? And I would say, yeah, I would agree with that too. So this just takes a conversation then around, what are those migration laws? What are the assumptions upon which they're built? Might we need mechanisms to allow for faster processing for people that are in dire straits? Because to say, for instance, that we should be a country of laws, and with that is, and I don't care if there's a tent city on the Mexico side of the border where crime is rampant and conditions are awful, and that's where a lot of people are get stuck because they fled some war situation in Central or South America and came here, and we won't let them in, and now their situation is just worse. I'm like, yes, we should have a country of laws, and we should enforce our laws, but that doesn't mean therefore we get to just be blind to everything and say, you know what, that's your problem because you're not from our country. I don't know. A lot of times I don't see people expressing that kind of concern for people within the country. It seems to me that we have compassion for people that we consider to be in our tribe. And based on the framing of a particular situation, that notion of tribe changes. What I see is that a lot of people relate to people that look like them and are from their background and are very empathetic when they see them suffering. But when they see or hear about people that are vastly different, they're not as affected by it. And so part of my vision, if you will, is that the whole world would be your tribe. That whether they're in your community or your same religion or your same gender or your same sexual orientation, same nationality, same ethnic group, ultimately I think that should be important. And so you can still have a country based on law and enforcement of laws, and you can still have a concern for humankind. you just have to, at that point, we just have to say, great, how can we make these work together? But it gets, that process gets stopped. And when it gets stopped, I think what I find frustrating is it seems like, going back to the metaphor of you're on a team trying to create a new vision for your company, and every time an idea is offered, somebody says, nope, that's not how things are. Nope, that's how, it's like, I know that's not how things are. What we're trying to do is create a vision for something better. And anybody said, well, we don't want something better. We like how things are. That strikes me as like, well, I mean, surely we all need stability, right? We can't just throw out everything. But there also, I think, should be a constant search for how can we be better? I mean, again, companies always want, continuous improvement, but what about humankind? What about our social institutions? What about our ways of living together? Those are things I think we need constant improvement on. And I think it just takes a little bit of questioning those assumptions. If somebody were to say, and I do hear people say this, that humans are such that if they don't need to do something, they won't do anything, they'll sit in their bed. And I'm like, that's just not true. There are people that just sit in their bed. And there are people that don't have to do anything and they still find meaning and purpose in life and are very active and productive and yada yada. So it's not just human nature. I think we have assumptions we need to question about things like that. So one way that I see this um, concretely is move away from migration, but I think this notion I was talking about, how our actions are shaped by the norms around us, by the institutions and practices around us, and those shape the way we think. We just very naturally accept that the way things are, there's a logic to it, and it's good and right. And I think the way to overcome that in a very real way is for people to work together on concrete local problems, and especially work together across difference. Um, so let's pick one. Let's say homelessness, right? So, if that's something that every local community, many local communities need to deal with. And I think if people got active in that and started with going to the Fisher and Urey notion, going from proposals down to purposes, what are we trying to accomplish here? And I think they might say something like, all of us can agree that we don't want homeless people on the street. And I think some people in that group would say, yeah, I don't want it on the street because it makes us a bad place to live. And somebody else would say, I don't like it because it causes crime. And other people would say, I don't want it because I feel for those people who are living on the street. That isn't the kind of life that they should have to live. And that's okay. Those are different concerns. They're not mutually exclusive. You can work together like that. And if everybody agreed, okay, we don't want homeless people on the street. And then my guess is an argument would arise, a discussion would arise. Why are they on the street? Is it because they choose to? Is it because they value some things over others? They value a lifestyle of drugs, and so they don't care about anything else. They want to live on the street. And I think there are communities like that, by the way. I never would have thought so. I think I've seen some of those. And other people would say, no, nobody chooses to be on the street. They're on the street because we have a system where lots of people fall through the safety nets. And it takes a family member getting cancer to drain your savings away, to cause real emotional trauma to where you combine that with maybe then you get laid off from your job and you just have a hard time bouncing back. Sometimes our system requires a lot of us and is not very empathetic to things can accumulate. And whereas I'm pretty resilient and I can handle something really bad happening to me, I may not be able to handle 5 bad things happening to me, right? I mean, things can, and if you get 350 million people, there's going to be varying degrees of how many bad things happen to one person at one time, right? And so sometimes when you get a handful of things happen, people fall hard, and then they fall through the very large gaps in our safety nets, and they end up homeless. I think all those are reasons why people are homeless. Just in this concrete situation, just to make the example, I think the people that come to this meeting with these assumptions about why are people homeless, they're all right. None of them are universally right, right? No, none of those explanations explain why every single homeless person is homeless. to varying degrees, some do match reality. And I think that's okay. And I think at that point, there's never an easy solution to solve it. But I think if you have people coming together saying, if we agree that we don't want it, and we agree that there might be these reasons for it, oh, there's lots of things on the local level. There's lots of things you could do. If nothing else, you could go talk to individual homeless people in a show of support and solidarity and love, and just say, by the way, why are you here? Why are you homeless? And then, having done that, it wouldn't be too hard for that group to get together and say, well, concretely, these are why these people are homeless. What do we need to do about it? A lot of cities, um, it's funny the solutions people find. Some cities just say, let's just run them out. It's like, yeah, but they're still homeless. They're just homeless somewhere else. You're just taking your problems and kicking them to another city. That doesn't solve the problem. Um, and in other places, you're just like, nah, just let them be. And there are some areas that, I mean, just a couple examples, but Austin, Texas, and Salt Lake City, Utah are two places I've been in recently that were just had these huge homeless communities. And again, I'm just like, why? Why are you here? Is this a lifestyle choice? And if so, is there maybe a better way we can handle it? And if it's not a lifestyle choice, how did you fall through the cracks, and what can we do to solve that problem? So I can't solve the problem of homelessness right here. But my point is, I think in the course of enacting something like that really solved the problem in a very small area locally, I think the people that were involved in that and in being engaged in the practices that the practices themselves treated humans differently. Instead of saying, not my problem, it was like, no, we're all in this together. What can we do? I think you would see people changing their thinking. And I think over time, um, we could probably look back at how we used to be so callous to various forms of human suffering and just accept it as is. And I think the real way we're going to see the world become a better place, if that's ever possible, is working concretely across difference, not in echo chambers, on problems without assuming that we already have the solution and we already know the answers, but working with people that disagree with us, where we can just find common cause and work concretely for it. And my experience has been that being engaged in the activity of doing stuff is the best way to affect how people think and act in the world.